Welcome back to Skeleton Knight to Another World, Anime Review, Episode 3. Excuse me. Yes. Now, this episode, I'm covering Episode 3 of the anime, and a street elf dances for her comrades. Now, this does take from Chapter 3. Now, one thing I did notice, though, about rereading the chapter is that the segment of the chapter, a small segment, where Ark meets Ponyta first time, they adapted that section for last week's episode. Do not know why, but they did. I thought that was kind of weird. They adapted that over, or at least that partially into this chapter. So the episode starts off with the female elf who first showed up back in episode 1. Her looking for something. A little bit later is actually looking for children. And then we see Ark just going to a cave, walk into a cave, scaring bandits, beating them up, and discovering a whole bunch of treasure, and discovering also 2 empty cages. He does meet the female elf on the outside, gets a brief fight with her. Of course, she thinks that he's responsible because, well, he's human, he's maybe responsible for kidnapping children. And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And she also says, don't interfere in elf affairs. And, of course, he's very curious about her after this encounter. But don't worry, it's not the last deceiver of the episode. Then pretty much, right afterwards, wondering what the heck she is. And he asked some info about it in the village he was staying at. By the way, the episode cuts a lot of stuff here from the chapter. The stuff they cut out mostly is a lot of travel time. Yes, they basically cut a lot of travel stuff. Him going to the inn he stays at, which, by the way, they briefly see in the episode eating food. Which, in the book, they actually have a whole scene with him, basically, where he's asking the barkeep who runs the inn, asked to take food to his room. He said yes, and apparently he's very awkward at seeing him coming down the stairs with an empty tray and him wearing his helmet. Now, they cut the completely out of the anime. It's like a brief scene at the end, and then right afterwards, see him hopping through the forest. Excuse me. There was actually a lot more going on here. They probably cut all that stuff due to time, because they only had 23 minutes, so keep the good bits in. Keep the stuff probably people were not interested in, basically, despite the fact the scene of the barkeep, probably him reacting to seeing Ark come down the stairs with an empty tray while having his helmet on. That would have been quite hilarious. But nope, we cut the anime because we wanted to speed things up. Mention the whole thing about the elf force, which they briefly talk about in this episode, at being bigger than the last forest he was in, and that's it. In the actual book itself, there's actually several pages of him looking for this forest and talking to various people. That's more so the cut due to time. Like, a lot of stuff was cut due to time. So, he goes into the elf village while hopping on his dimension hopping with Ponyta. By the way, when the female elf sees him with this creature, the conversation is mostly intact from the book, which I do praise the anime for doing that, keeping that very good conversation. Like her basically surprised to see what she refers to as basically a spirit animal being with him. Ponyta, of course. Mm-hmm. A Volta Vulpus. A cottontail fox. Yeah, adorable little creature. Yeah, she's actually quite surprised the fact that this creature was with him. And of course, Ark does see this woman a little later on when he goes into the forest, presumably looking for her, probably because he's interested in her. And then, of course, before he gets this, I stuck with this brief scene, which I think they basically took this from a little bit toward the end of chapter 2. Yes. So, we have this, presumably a high-level official. Well, apparently he's dealing in illegal goods, and apparently he was responsible for the stuff that happened in episode 1. Yep. He was responsible for that. Basically, okay, kill a little girl. The girl was 16. You call that a little girl? And also, he was responsible for setting the basilisk we saw in the last episode. Okay, so he's responsible for this. Is the main villain of the episode? Not really, per se. No. Me. The guy's name is Trayton. Mm-hmm. And this episode was his debut. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, basically, have various things on where his son is. And then we see his son in the episode, this buffoon of a guy. Yes, his son. Named Uderon. And oh boy, the guy is a punk. The guy's got an earring and basically looks like a Monday punk. Yeah. And apparently he treats the elves as lower beings, basically not as regular people. So Ark basically is about to interfere, and then of course the female elf comes in, takes out a number of them, and then of course he's also, this same guy was also threatening the elves, like cutting at her leg, and cutting at the cheek. When he's preparing her, like, and then we have the guys walk up to the female elf, where they proceed to cut off her cloak, and it is very heavily implied they're going to rape her. And yes, this scene happened in the book too, so don't worry, this scene is pretty much intact from the book. Except they cut out like a lot of stuff here. Well, they cut characters featured in the scene, like male elves. Yes! That's one thing I do notice with this episode. You don't see a physical appearance by a male elf in the episode. Nope, you don't see them. You see a couple guys in cloaks like you don't see a physical appearance by a male elf, mostly a bunch of female elves. So Ark pretty much uses his teleportation to transfer behind the guy, punch him really hard in the face, and he uses a move known as the Ark Lariat, aka a clothesline, and beats up a lot of these guys, and the female elf basically takes out the rest of them. And then they mentioned looking for a key. In the book, basically, it was when the male elves found the key and unlocked the door. In the anime, in order to speed up this scene, we had Ark use, basically because he's really strong, have him crush the lock, pull down the gate, and he proceeds to... Well, first he also uses and they mentioned about these collars, which those were in the book too, and it seems like a lot of the dialogue that the female gives in this episode, like particularly this scene, those are from male elves. Why in the world they decided to give it to her? My guess, because basically they probably didn't want, because she's hot, and because they want to do more with it, because basically their plans for the character. So, give a lot of dialogue that was spoken by men in the book. So I mentioned about these anti-monocollars, which prevent from escaping, and he uses an uncurse on them, like uncurse spell on it. It was like that. Here in the book, basically, he didn't know if it would work, and it works anyways. And the anime is like, I know something. Use the curse, and that's it. There's no hesitation, no suggestion it might not work, nothing. Just does anyways. And then he basically heals her leg. And of course, he's asked to heal her leg, and then of course he does. And then the kids basically jumping on top of him. Well, he's basically like just hanging off him because he's a very friendly guy. In the book, he actually heals all the girls. He heals all of them. Now, why in the world they cut that from the book, the anime? I'm not really sure, but it could be gotta speed this up. Come on, move on. Let's get to the good stuff. And then afterwards, basically, we see her communicating with I think the front of it is a whisper bird, and it flies away. Basically, it functions the same way as Odin's ravens, where Odin can talk through these damn things. And this is a very similar thing to that, and the elf basically talks to him. This, of course, is Draken. It's actually his first appearance in the series, though we hear his voice, don't see him physically per se. Not probably a little later on. And, of course, meet with some male elves. And then that's when they finally introduce each other properly to each other, despite the fact they interacted a lot in the episode. Which, now I can say her name. The female elf is Arlene Grace Maple. Mm-hmm. Yes, that is her name. Yep, that's her name. And, of course, Ark basically introduces himself as a wandering mercenary. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So Then, of course, basically, she's mentioned, oh, you mentioned you're a mercenary? Can I hire you? And that's the episode ends. I gotta say, they do keep a lot of the really good stuff here. But, man, they cut a lot of stuff out here. I mean, does it affect the episode at all? Not really, per se, no. Plot-wise, moves along at a somewhat quick pace, but not really quick to basically give a headache. But it's definitely a damn good episode. I definitely recommend basically checking out these first few episodes for the series. And, well, by the way, the only communicated thing we see the whole episode, because Ark is serious the whole time, is him when he eats food. When he gets like over the top with it. Now in the book, basically, he also mentions when he goes to the inn, where he mentions that this is different in the lesson. He said it was a much more sturdier bed for him to sleep in. Yeah, big hulking guy like him sleeping in a bed. That is something. Surprisingly, we haven't seen anything of his armor yet in the series, in the opening. The last thing was to see him out of the armor when he's bathing. But not, he probably does not sleep in the armor per se. I don't think he does. I think he sleeps without the armor on. But what he looks like without the armor on, aside from the fact he's a freaking skeleton, it's not been specifically revealed in the series. Because the armor sees him as a big hulking guy. Also reminds me, his size reminds me of Darkseid from DC Comics. Because he towers over pretty much everybody in the whole series. I think the only thing that basically is taller than him is a freaking basilisk so far in this series. But I've been loving this series so far. I've loved the book so far. I pretty much have read the first... As of right now, I've read the first 5 books. I'm planning on reading another one soon. And to date, released here, they've only released 8 books so far. Out of 9. Yes, 9 is to release. Actually, it's about 10. Because I think 10 is supposed to be released soon over there. Over in Japan. Yes. Yeah, 10 has not been released yet there. Actually, it has. But 9 is to be released here. Yes. 9 is going to become... Now, 9 apparently came out in Japan about 3 years ago. Yeah, that's kind of weird. The fact that this book came out that long ago. Yeah, 9 years ago. Like, you're thinking, really? Yeah, as far as I can tell, that basically there's presumably like no apparent reason at all why in the world that there's these... It could be because of the pandemic. That's probably the reason why the writer waited 3 years between books. Yes. And the next book basically is here. It's supposed to be in August. Actually, no, it has been released here, yes. Book 9 has been released here already. Physically came out this past August of last year. And there is technically one more book left to be released. Now, apparently, it was released in Japan just last month. And get this. It's not set to be released here digitally until next year. Yes, next year. Yep. Now, like I said, I'm loving the series so far. I think the series is just really good. And it said basically that about 12 days ago we're going to get a dub for the series. Who's going to dub these characters? I don't know. I'd be surprised if I wouldn't be surprised if I heard Brian Knickerbocker voice one of these characters. Who I think should get the voice? Arlene might be a good choice. It's possible, but I do want to see her as a regular character voicing one of the characters. Like Ark, I could see. Well, the one I could possibly think of. I don't think they're bringing Chris Guerrero per se to dub Ark. I would probably say Crunchyroll would probably bring in. And this is my personal theory. They might bring in the actor who played Subaru, or probably bring the one who played Katsuma. It's possible. Yep. So yeah, that's it for Cycle Review. Next one's going to be a Comic Corner, and then the final episode of Shaman King. Okay, next video. Bye.